Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So welcome to Paris, welcome to the Software Summit, welcome to this workshop that we are going to run now. You know, we have an impressive set of the distinguished panelists that cover from public sector funding agency, major private research institutions, entities in Europe, scientists, academics. I think, you know, we managed to get a good collection of different perspectives and point of views that our Microsoft Research EMEA chairman, Dr. Andrew Herbert, has kindly agreed to chair, moderate, and get running. So given that we're a little bit late, I'm not going to say much more, beside thanking again all the panelists and all the delegates to attend this event. So without any further ado, I'd like to leave the floor to Andrew and get the workshop started. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fabrizio. And if I can add my own words of welcome to everyone here in Paris, I'm sure for many of us an invitation to be in Paris in April was a difficult one to refuse. I apologise slightly for my voice. I've been fighting a cold the last week, so I'm probably an octave lower than usual. I'm sure if I wanted to sing a basso part in opera, this would be the week to do it. So this is if I make the machine work, very good. Our Software Summit workshop on the role of funding agencies and industrial research in promoting computer science education. I hope this will be an interesting discussion. We've uniquely, I think, been able to get together people that represent national funding agencies, colleagues from the European Union who obviously run important funding programs, a number of us from industry labs, and colleagues from academia. And I'm sure for our colleagues from academia, they see those all as different sources of funding that come with different kinds of complexity and different things you have to say to secure the funding in the first place, and different expectations about what you will do with the money when you've got it and what you will say you did with it after you've completed the project. Some are very hands-off, some are very hands-on, some are very long-term and broad, some are very perhaps tactical and focused. I think it'll be interesting to explore that space together, understand what some of the constraints and issues are from both sides, and to understand how those groups can work well together. Because I'm sure, certainly for the academic audience, if industry is pulling one way, Europe is pulling another, and national funding is pulling yet a third, that could make life very, very difficult. Yet if we're all dancing to the same tune, that can sometimes exclude doing things that are important, but somehow aren't on the political agenda this week. And so I hope to have an interesting debate about all those kind of questions. To try and bring a little bit of shape to the discussion, I asked each of the panelists to think about this list of questions and to pick up some points that would particularly resonate with them that they thought were important to make. So first of all, how competitive do we think European science and technology is today, and what does the future look like? Many of us are in difficult financial times. How do we justify spending public money on research rather than other things, particularly when governments are stressed about healthcare, employment, all those other major issues in times of financial crisis? What actually is the role of industry and government in public funded research? Are we just a source of money? Are we a source of leadership? Where do we sit in those two? What should be the relationship between EU funding and national programs? And I know the answer to that question varies a great deal from country to country. Some countries have very strong sources of national funding. Others are much more dependent on the European Union. There's also the role of foundations, I think, is very important. And perhaps one gap in our discussion is we don't have someone from a foundation here, but perhaps our academic colleagues can represent their interests. How can the various funding agencies facilitate collaboration, and collaboration that's actually based on scientific goals rather than just some political purpose of having enough countries appearing on the documentation. How important is the concept of excellence? Everyone talks about excellence being a criteria for funding science. How do you decide what is excellent? What do you do about growing capacity in areas where perhaps you aren't excellent today, but you feel you have to be excellent in the future? And how do you balance excellence against the political pressures to be seen to be fair and accommodating all regions and so forth? How prescriptive should a research funding body be in directing the research it funds? Is it, in the language that one of the British research councils discussed, is it just a fruit machine where researchers pull the handle and if 3 lemons come up, they get money, if 3 lemons don't come up, they don't get money? Is it something much more structured and targeted? And certainly our experience here is the research community doesn't like it being a lottery, but they also don't like it telling them what they should research. So there's a real contradiction in the way people respond. And then on from that, looking to the research community itself, what are the expectations of a modern researcher beyond being, if you just like, the pure academic in their laboratory doing research? What broader role do they have in communicating to society, in helping formulate policy? And how do we think about the training of research students, junior academics, to help them be able to step up to the kind of roles we think are necessary? So that's a very broad set of questions. We have a very distinguished set of panelists representing a broad base of industry, academia, and countries. We have the President of the ACM, Alan Chenet. We have Bertrand Meyer, co-founder of Informatics Europe from ETH in Zurich. Leo Pluger from SURF in the Netherlands. Leslie Thompson from the UK, the Engineering Physical Sciences and Research Council. Full disclosure, I sat on that council to the end of last month, so I was a thorn in Leslie's side for, I think, 5 years in total. They let me off for good behaviour in the end. Mario Compolago from the Information Society Directorate in the European Commission. My colleague Matthias Kaiserwert from IBM Research. We sit on various panels together and have an interesting time comparing and contrasting how Microsoft and IBM do things and how we can both leverage the European academic environment. Michel Cosnard, great colleague from INRIA, where we have a joint research centre here in Paris, and they had an excellent forum exhibiting their research yesterday. Ricardo Baez from Yahoo in Barcelona. Stefan Janischen from the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, and Tula Terry from Aalto University. Aalto is very interesting. Many of you may know Finland reorganized its technical universities a year or two ago, and Aalto is the result of that process. We've had many interesting interactions with helping them understand what our agenda might be and how we might work together. So a very distinguished set of panelists. I think they'll bring a lot of different views. The format we're going to run to, we have a coffee break in the middle. We're going to start with people more from the funding agencies and the major research institutions giving their views, and then after coffee the balance will switch a little more to the academic and industry research community, and so perhaps more from management and policy to people actually on the benches doing the real work. We've asked each panelist to give a short position of about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a moderated discussion which I'll lead with the audience. And I hope there'll be lots of interaction. And our aim is, as an outcome from this session, to collect a transcript and commentary that hopefully we can edit and capture some of the issues. And if there are conclusions and strong directions, hopefully that will be very helpful. I will certainly value that in thinking about how Microsoft Research interacts with the academic community, and I'm sure colleagues from the research funding agencies will find that very helpful. So I probably ought to steal a few minutes, turning myself from chairman, if you like, into panelists, and just talk a little bit about the Microsoft Research view on some of those issues. For us, the academic community is terribly important. Microsoft Research itself is a basic research organization. I'll talk more about our shape and organization at the start of the main conference this afternoon. But if you think of us as being a little bit like a privately owned university research lab, you're not far wrong in your model. But even with 1,000 researchers across our 6 or so labs worldwide, we can't do all the research in all the topics that the company needs. And so we're very dependent on academic collaboration with other researchers. And so the health of the academic research ecosystem is terribly important to us. It's also, of course, the world from which we recruit many of our researchers, and so we need to secure that supply of young talent. I think importantly to us, people can get very emotional about words and language, and we could easily lose this panel in terminology, which I'm determined we will not do. But certainly for me, basic research is a label that can apply to things that are just driven by academic curiosity, perhaps at the more theoretical end of the spectrum, but also things that are driven by some burning sense of application. I quite like the Pasteur's quadrant model of research, which divides research up into 4 quadrants. There's the curiosity-driven research is Bohr's quadrant, where you find theoretical physics. The application-driven quadrant is Pasteur's quadrant. He wanted to understand disease, the cause of disease, and cures. That's vaccination. There are 2 other quadrants. One represents advanced engineering, and one that in Stokes's book where he defined this, he doesn't give it a label, but I've put the label tinkering in that box. And tinkering is the refuge of the not very excellent academic, doing minor things that don't actually add very much value. And that's the box we all, I think, want to stay out of. So, as an industry lab with that context, that obviously gives us a lot of obligations and responsibilities towards academic research. And so we need to be supportive and encouraging, offer leadership, yet at the same time respect people's freedom and desire to research on topics that are important to them. I think a particular challenge that industry labs have is our areas of focus, or certainly the language we use to describe what interests us, changes on a cycle of probably a year or 2, reflecting the dynamics of the market in which our mothership operates. And so you will find me in this event talking about cloud computing, natural user interfaces, inference, not algorithms, trustworthy computing, and other grandiose buzz phrases. That's the language we use inside the company to talk about how our research bears on themes that are important to the business. Yet, paradoxically, alongside that, the areas of competence in Microsoft research, and if I look to our major lab in Europe, which is in Cambridge, the set of topics there are essentially constant. The same research groups that we had on day 1, we've added groups. Our areas of strength, programming languages, machine learning, computational science, those are the things we invest in, but what they apply themselves to seems to change over time. And so balancing that, I think, is quite important. And then we have 2 smaller centres, which are more in the world of applied research, advanced development, one in Aachen, working on embedded and real-time systems, one in Cairo, working on technologies particularly relevant to the Arabic marketplace, and other environments where complex script and natural language research issues are important. So the challenges are, I think, that industry has 12-month budget cycles. It's difficult for me to sign agreements that last longer than a year because I'm essentially committing money I don't know I've got in the future. That's very hard. We suffer from grandiose themes of the moment because we've got marketing people who are whispering words like cloud computing in our ears on a daily basis. And the real nightmare, I'm sure, for academics is when that resonates with things that are being whispered in our ears by politicians. And then you find tremendous pressure to research X, even if X isn't what you want to do. And that's very difficult. Challenges in research collaboration are the widely varying attitudes to intellectual property in universities. And there are many dimensions to that. There's a very simple spectrum from knowledge should be free. And so nothing can be licensed, nothing can be constrained or directed, through to the other end, where if an institution has a particularly aggressive technology transfer office, you might discover you're essentially dealing with a sales team who are trying to maximize their revenue and want to give you the least for the highest fee. And we operate across that whole spectrum. Our legal department try and write agreements that compass that whole spectrum, and then we discover they've all got very large and very complicated. So there's things there to talk about. What is the right relationship? Obviously, industry wants to be able to exploit and leverage ideas, but we also want to encourage freedom to research. And then another boundary I think is very hard, is the boundary between research and advanced development is not an easy one to pin down, but certainly collaborative advanced development for us is a difficult thing to do because then you are deep in the world of managing the intellectual property. If you're working with us on something where there's a product planned, there are deadlines and schedules, and that is a bit of a death march, not something an academic wants to do. And you've got business groups in there evaluating what is going on and so forth. Yet that kind of collaborative development, I think, is increasingly important to build some of the test beds, to do some of the trials and evaluations, particularly of web-scale projects and so forth, and working together to build research infrastructure. And so we have to find ways to make that work very well. So I've, I think, taken enough time. What I'd like to do is now hand over to our colleagues on the panel, invite each of them to come up and give us their up to 10 minutes. You're more than welcome to use less than that, so we have more time for Q&A. And so in the first session, we'll start with Mario for an EU view, Leslie for a UK view, Leo from Netherlands, Michelle from France, and Stefan from Germany. So if I can start first, please, with Mario, and I think your slides are on this machine. So with a bit of luck, I can make this work. Oops. Do you recognize your slides on here?
I'll probably find them soon.
I think if I do that, we can hide our embarrassment while we... Let's see it come on here, first of all. Very good. And I should probably give you the microphone also. What we should do is swap slides and give each other's talks. I'm sure that will be exciting for both parties. Mario, please. And this is the clicker to go forwards.
Okay. Andrew, thank you very, very much. Thanks to the colleagues that invited me to be here today. It's a pleasure to be in Paris in spring. It's also a pleasure to be here with you and try to bring you some of the perspectives that we are currently dealing in terms of the problematic of public support to research. And I think that is quite interesting to be here today because we are right in the midst of the preparations for the next framework program. And so I thought that was important to give you a glimpse of what we are doing on that front and maybe to have one or two more comments about related topics. So just very briefly to say that Europe has launched this Europe 2020 agenda, trying to get these keywords: smart growth, sustainable and inclusive growth. These three keywords, you can see them in all the policy speeches of our policy masters. And this Europe 2020 flagship is then put in place by a number of other flagships, some of them that bear a very significant importance to the work in research, namely the digital society related one and called the Digital Agenda for Europe, that tries to promote the online market in Europe. The aspects of innovation, and in particular the Innovation Union flagship, and also the one more related to competitiveness and industrial policy for the globalization era. The seven flagships, as you can see, they relate to complementary aspects, and they are, say, the policy agenda, the political agenda for the Commission for the years to come. When we come then to look how they articulate the objectives of smart, sustainable and inclusive growth, in which you find headlines like the attempt to move Europe into the 3% of GDP invested in research and development, you see clearly that the Digital Agenda for Europe puts as a central pillar the pillar on research and innovation. When you look to the Innovation Union flagship, you see how we try to move out of the research and development to incorporate now innovation and a path towards the market. When you look into the industrial policy flagship, you see, for example, what we see as key enabling technologies and the importance that they have in the European scene. Innovation has been actually considered by the European Council of February this year as really a key for future growth and jobs. ICT plays a particular role in this context. It represents in Europe 4.8%, but its importance is much bigger. In fact, the productive growth that is triggered by ICT sector is significantly higher, reaching 50% in our own statistics. Also, when you think about the value of ICT in terms of a percentage of the GDP, you see that comparative to other countries, and both in terms of manufacturing and services, Europe performs as it is there. Clearly, you see Japan putting much more focus on manufacturing, while the United States putting focus more on services as well as Europe. But you see that comparatively, we have a significant way to go. So the digital agenda for Europe takes the smart, sustainable and inclusive growth objectives and tries to see how we can exploit the ICT aspects to really satisfy these three big objectives. And in one word, we say that what we try to put is in place this virtuous circle of the digital economy to work. And this is basically summarized around this notion that if you put more attractive content and services, they will stimulate demand, and in turn this creates business cases for investment in better infrastructure. And we have this diagram that we call internally the washing machine, sort of bringing creation of services and contents, having an impact on the service demand, and then the rollout of new infrastructures. In fact, if you look to the digital agenda, it tries to address some of the challenges that we see in Europe, fragmented digital markets. This also applies, and was highlighted by Andrew, on the research scene, lack of investment in infrastructure, aspects of trust in the networks, and it was interesting to see that trust was one of the keywords that you highlighted, aspects of interoperability, stepping up efforts on research and innovation, aspects of skills and digital literacy, and the responses to the societal challenges. And for each one of those, say, basic challenges of the digital economy, what we see is that we structure the digital agenda to try to have a series of actions to address each one of those challenges. That goes from a digital single market set of actions, looking into the aspects of interoperability, trust and security, the deployment of broadband in Europe with concrete targets, aspects of digital literacy, skills and inclusion, services to the citizen, and last but not least, the aspects of research and innovation and the obviously embedded international dimension. The digital agenda has no money attached to it, but is a significantly strategy embedded in the European processes and determining the actions that are done in political terms. When it comes, for example, to a single market, you have questions like IPR or rights management that have to do with not necessarily with aspects of soft law. They do really are at the core of a legislative process in Europe. But it goes also into influencing what the research and innovation of the future is going to be, or in which actions can be taken by member states and the European Union, for example, in trust and security, to create cybercrime or cybersecurity exercises, or to launch certs for the different member states and the European Union, for example. So you see that it is really a structuring element in our policy. Out of that, and together with the Innovation Union, we are more precisely now looking, and I thought it was more important for you, to look into how we try to shape the research beyond 2013. As you know, the ones that are embedded in or involved in research projects at European level, the current framework program goes up to 2013, and we are now preparing with the member states what comes next. And I thought it was also very interesting to present it here, because precisely at this moment in time, the green paper on what we call the Common Strategic Framework is now up in consultation. So all of you are kindly invited to provide your views and comments on the priorities and the way we are going to structure this new framework program, if I may say. I use already the word common strategic framework, and you see it in the first bullet, because At this moment in time, what is today part of the research program, but also part of the competitiveness and innovation program, looking more into the deployment of transnational services, public services, and deploying them in practice with test beds, etc., as well as the initiatives around the European Institute of Technology, will all of them be brought together into what we call a common strategic framework. And for the ones that used to go through the sites of the European Commission, you would have noticed probably that we are seeking to find an interesting name to the framework program number 8. But for the time being, this notion of a common strategic framework is very important for us. Also because associated to that, and as you could see from my reference to Innovation Union, we will be looking not just to a more coherent set of funding instruments, but we are looking very much to include the innovation aspect in the whole perspective. And obviously, I would never be in the position of talking about the next framework program without talking about simplification, because we are going to simplify the things. The last 20 years I have been through a number of framework programs that was always a very serious attempt, not always very successful, but I guess that this time we will do it better. So as I said, this common strategic framework will somehow cover what today is the 7th framework program, 53 billion euro. I'm going to highlight, say, the non-integration aspect, maybe forcing a little bit just to make the point, divided into 4 main programs: ideas, people, cooperation, capacities, the competitiveness and innovation program, again, into 3 programs that implemented aspects of enterprise and innovation, intelligent energy and ICT policy support, one area that ΓÇó is responsible for, where we have done a lot of e-government, e-identity, or related topics, and also the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, a recent body, a EU body, that is supporting what has been known as the knowledge and innovation communities, a budget that is relatively modest, but that brings an important aspect because it brings the triangle of education, research, and business into a kind of a significant interplay. And the education is something that in our programs is not, or in the framework program is not very much focused, and the education towards an entrepreneurial attitude is certainly very, very important for Europe. Why are we looking to a CSF that brings an increased impact? Well, first because rather than having different priorities in terms of the capacities or the ideas or others that we have today, we want to focus into 3 dimensions of the same view: the societal challenges, competitiveness, and research excellence. Those are, say, the 3 key words that you'll see us talking very much when we talk about the next framework program. And very important for us is that we are not going to focus anymore on research or even research and development. You highlighted, Andrew, the very importance that you attach to test beds and research infrastructures. Here it is particularly the case where we want to go even beyond that and integrate any actions that under the label of innovation will facilitate the transfer between research and the market. So, and we will support projects that will sit on one side of very, say, scientific driven, and on the other opposite side, very close to the market and facilitating demonstration, implementation of test beds, trialing, etc. So very important is that innovation becomes prominent in our strategy. Innovation that is either stemming from technological innovation or by other types of innovation. The simplification, indeed, we are doing currently a reflection to try to significantly rationalize the type of funding schemes that we have. It is a concrete objective to reduce the time to contract, having more standard rules across the different initiatives, and facilitate your access to the funding from the European Commission by putting in place some mechanisms of one-stop shop, common IT platforms, or common entry points for the whole framework program. As I said, we are doing currently a consultation, and therefore we invite all of you to collaborate with us. The consultation looks, for example, into questions: where should we better act at European level to make the difference? How can we pool resources between member states and the European Union? How can we go out of the traditional grant models and introduce other financial schemes that could have a higher effect in terms of leveraging our investment? And we think about equities, debts, all kinds of even prizes as mechanisms that we'll put in place. What sort of role we should give to the aspect of tackling societal challenges, balance between what's curiosity-driven in one extreme to look into your quadrants and the agenda-driven research. How can we strengthen competitiveness? Does it make sense to continue talking about jetties or public-private partnerships? What is the role of European technology platforms? And in particular, how can we support, for example, SMEs? There's always a lot of people that has criticized some of the European programs by being too much top-down. We are considering very clearly in this context probably to have topic agnostic and time-independent submission of proposals. What is the role of pre-commercial procurement to support research? So all of those are very important questions that we are seeking guidance from public at large. And last but not least, aspects of science-based and the European research area. What is the role that we should see for the European Research Council? How do we look into future and emerging technologies? What is the importance of research infrastructures? And within the research infrastructures, what is the role for ICT research infrastructures? In one sense, to support science, but maybe in another sense, to support research on ICT. That is an aspect that we are not covering today very much, and the important aspect of international cooperation. What is really now the future when we think about our capability to continuously innovate? And now I jump a little bit into a few scattered ideas inspired by the topic of this workshop. Yeah, it will be just another one or two slides and very, very short. We have been looking internally how digital science is evolving. The sort of technology enablers that we need to consider, I mean, they are all scattered in different parts of the program, but they are all very important. They come from networks or key technologies. The aspects of sensors, very, very important. Data infrastructures, aspects of simulation, clouds for science, the aspects of open access to the results, the blogging capabilities to be used for science. Knowledge sharing is very, very important. And obviously, all of this relates to aspects of policy governance that have to do with a lot of things that we have to put into perspective when we think about how to do the research in the future. Authorship, open access, aspects of multidisciplinary attitude, education, social responsibility, ethics, deontology, the globalization of science, the implications in terms of social aspects, etc. All of those are important that we need to address when we think about the future. And there is this multiple faceted from infrastructures to research, economy, society, and education that really raise to us very important questions at European and national level. Data in science is very fundamental. If we have to choose, I think, a word, data will emerge as the key word, and this relates obviously to computational power, computational science. It's very, very important, and I think that having Tony A with us, that has been one of the evangelists of the importance of data for e-science, that pays some tribute and at the same time reveals that in the Commission we are very keen on highlighting the aspects of and the role of data. If you see some of the ICT drivers that emerge, connecting everything and everybody, smart spaces, sensing everything, processing power everywhere, data from everywhere at any time, new materials, increased capabilities. Those are some of the areas that we'll have to address in the future. And obviously, the innovation has an effect of multidisciplinarity, the entrepreneurial culture that we have to increase dramatically in Europe by bringing universities to create this culture, this spirit of creativity and entrepreneurship, and the valorization of results as a very, very important aspect. So we believe that investing at the European level in research and innovation is key for the objectives of the Europe 2020, overcoming fragmentation between different member states, but also ensuring better links between education, research, and innovation becomes very, very important. And we hope that with a new common strategic framework in which you can at this stage cooperate by inputting your views, will be giving us an opportunity to continue positioning or repositioning Europe in the research and innovation arena. Thank you very much.
I think you're working that slide over? Yeah. Very good. So if I can introduce Leslie. Leslie is Director of Research Base for the British Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. In the UK, academic research is essentially funded by group bodies called the Research Councils. EPSRC, as the name suggests, owns engineering and physical science, and computing is part of that. In fact, quite a large part of it, programs like digital economy. And Leslie's responsibilities are very much the planning and organising of that research portfolio, which has certainly been a friend to the UK computer science community and a great help to us all. So, Leslie,
thank you, Andrew. Right. Well, good morning. I've decided not to go down the PowerPoint route. So I'm going to give you some personal reflections covering some of the questions that Fabrizio suggested. And they're very much born out of experiences of the last year. So I work for the organisation, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. Going forward, we have of the order of £750 million a year to invest in research and high-level training. This time last year, it was 800 million. It's going down, and I want to talk about some of those experiences going forward. The first thing I think we ought to talk about is just how damn successful research in Europe is. 2 weeks ago, the Royal Society produced this report. It's a brilliant report, Knowledge, Networks and Nations, where it talked really about the value of European research, of international research, and how the scientific community across the world will be much stronger and much more valuable to society if it works in partnership. I'll give you a couple of statistics from that report, and I have to apologise if you're from a nation in Europe that the Royal Society didn't analyse, but it looked at UK, Germany, France, Italy and Spain, and collectively those 5 countries between 1999 and 2003 produced 26% of all publications across the world. Between 2004 and 2008, that number went down to 23%. If you look at citations of those papers, between 1999 and 2003, it was 25% of all citations, and between 2004 and 2008, it was 27% of all citations. So Europe, if you add the other nations into it, is an incredibly strong and powerful force for research across the world. However, there are some threats on the horizon, and that is the growth of the sleeping giants, China, Brazil, India. Those countries are really investing significantly in research and have a huge intellectual capacity, which I think throws some real challenges up to Europe on how we work together to secure those relationships. So I really would encourage anybody who has an interest in international research to look at this really quite well put together document from the Royal Society. So this time last year, we were facing a general election in the UK, and the crisis in the public finances was the big issue for debate. Last May, a new government came to power, a coalition government, which in itself produced new and different challenges for interacting with government. And when the new government came into power, they started immediately a review of spending. And we were asked to work out, with a 30% cut in funding, what would our priorities be. I have to say, It was a very, very difficult time to just contemplate what a 30% cut in funding would mean for our ongoing research endeavour. Particularly because the UK is one of the most efficient research infrastructures already. So you couldn't look for massive efficiencies in the UK system. Per pound invested in research, its productivity in terms of citations, in terms of papers, in terms of patents, all sorts of measures, collaboration with business, is second to none. So, something quite remarkable happened. Because you should never waste a good crisis, there was a coming together of business, of academia, of people heading universities, all identifying a common message, which wasn't done top down, just everybody thought quite hard about the value of research and articulated very carefully why it was important for a government that needed a growing economy to invest in long-term research. And then everybody marshalled every argument they could to back that assertion up. So the chemists identified that £246 billion, the UK economy, is based on chemical research, long-term, past-funded by us. The medics identified that 17 years after an investment in medical research, if you talk about cardiovascular investment, every year in perpetuity, 40p is returned to every pound invested in medical research. If you're sitting in Treasury making decisions about money, that's a very persuasive number. The whole UK science community started to develop case studies to start to tell the narrative on why investments made 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago was really making a difference to the UK's economy and to the UK's society. We already have, in the £2.4 billion that the government invests in the research councils every year, something like 2,700 companies engaged in collaborative research. A significant number of those companies actually went in and saw Treasury and explained to the UK government why they invested their research in the UK. It was incredibly helpful that we have a number of major global companies, Microsoft being but one, who have R&D centres in the UK and are really doing leading edge research because of the ecosystem that exists, because of the long-term commitment to invest in research. It was very persuasive that we could point to how past investments in research was really giving us solutions to today's problems, be it in the medical domain, be it in the ICT domain. Government bought that. And then the final piece in the jigsaw was when actually Treasury started to say, well, if we don't cut by 30%, what happens if we do 25% or 20%? And the community, working with the funders of research, working with companies, were able to brigade an argument that there comes a point where actually you lose confidence in the science base, and because research is an incredibly creative process, a loss of confidence leads to a major decline in what you can achieve. And so very carefully the arguments were put together, and 12% was the number we came up with. A reduction of more than 12% in research funding over 4 years would lead to a major lack of confidence, would really damage the relationship we have with global companies, with local companies, and would really lead to a lost generation of researchers wanting to come in and do research. And the good news was, although it doesn't feel very good, now we're looking through the consequences, we faced a minus 14% cut in funding over 4 years. Compared to this time last year when we were on minus 30%, that is a huge success for everybody involved in research in the UK. And I think there are very good lessons that we could learn and need to take forward when we're not facing a crisis, when we're facing an opportunity in future settlements with the government for funding. So that's a truly British experience, but actually I think if you look across Europe, lots of European countries and the US are facing similar challenges. We really do need to be able to articulate a very clear and simple message to why long-term research is essential to the UK. Excellence. Undoubtedly, the excellence of research was critical in making the case for funding. And I passionately believe that it is not a good investment not to invest in anything other than excellent research. However, you have to be very careful with the terminology of excellent research. Tony, hey, I can't see Tony, knows very well that when you try and promote a new research endeavour, some of the people who do not see the vision of that research endeavour will, through their peer review judgment, say, well, that's not good quality science. It's not purist, it's not. We always suffer in the UK, and I think I've picked up from other panel members, it happens in other countries, a difference in quality and excellence judgments between engineering and, say, physics. It doesn't mean that engineering is less excellent. It just means the engineers are maybe a bit more pragmatic on what excellence is, because engineers always feel you can do better. Physicists quite often think even if something doesn't work, it's a good phys rev letter, so let's make sure we say everything is excellent. We really have to be careful in our judgments of excellence that we don't damage high-risk research, particularly when funding is tight, because a very dangerous thing to do would be to go for safe research and endanger long-term opening, burgeoning research areas. And finally, multidisciplinary research can be very endangered if you aren't cautious in how you use peer review to evaluate excellence. The good news is I had dinner with Tony last night. Tony and I worked together in EPSRC on some breaking wave areas back in 2002. Then our portfolio was less than 10% multidisciplinary. 43% of our research proposals we fund now are multidisciplinary. That has come from lots of individual decisions by peer reviewers who are now much more open to the opportunities at working between interfaces on disciplines and on challenge-led research. So that's a good story. Excellence is critical, but be cautious with how you deploy peer review to evaluate excellence of research. I want to touch on one last issue, and that's how prescriptive should research agencies be in funding research. Every penny of money that I am able to invest in the UK science base has come from the UK taxpayer investing their hard-earned money in taxes. So actually, we owe it to society to serve their needs and their future needs going forward, because they've had the confidence to invest in research. And therefore, in the UK, for the last 10 years, we've had a balance in the portfolio of research we support, much like the EU is now thinking about, between challenge-led research, the real challenges facing the globe, be it the lack of security and the lack of choices for generating energy that don't generate CO2, to food security, or the ageing population. So challenge-led research, identifying challenges for which then we really want the community to generate the ideas. They should be long-term ideas that are really going to capture the imagination and lead to solutions in the longer term for the global society. But that has to be balanced against discovery-led research. And I really worry about the definitions we use. We get really stuck in, is it basic or applied? I think challenge and discovery-led gives an interesting information space. Discovery-led research has to be about researchers following their nose, doing what they want. But even in discovery-led research, that is excellent, there has to be a balance. We have to get the right capability in challenge-led research. So it would be inappropriate for a nation the size of the UK to invest all of its funding in formal methods and none of its funding in comms research. So we have to make those balances in capability and in challenge-led research. And I think most researchers absolutely can offer contributions to both discovery and challenge-led research when given enough opportunity to discuss their ideas and to think about where the challenges are. And it is a real challenge for us to get the best brains in the world working on some of the global challenges alongside really great discovery-led research. That's a challenge for us. So I think it's a question of balance. I think the experiences in the UK of the last year have said, despite the UK being excellent, in a European context we're excellent. We've fought the good fight, and the funding we have for the next 4 years is much better than we had anticipated. We're now looking at how we balance the portfolio of research to enable challenge-led and discovery-led research. And finally, the bureaucrats in any funding agency don't come up with these balances in great isolation. We saw that in going through the case for spending for science. It was the scientific community and the business community that made the case and were persuasive to Treasury. And we see it in the priorities we have going forward, because actually Andy was one of the people who sat on our council and has given us our forward direction for the next 5 to 10 years. It's a joint endeavour, funding agencies, research community and the business sector working together to deliver the research that society will need over the longer term. And I personally can't think of a better insurance policy for any advanced nation to have than to have a cracking good science base that is engaged in excellent research that will have impact in the longer term. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent summary of what indeed was a challenging year.
A bloody
year for officials and committee. The starting question was, would you rather lose your arms or your legs? In the end, I think that we're missing a few fingers on one hand, which is probably a happier place to be. And I think, Leslie, do you want to join us on the stage? We're going to have the Q&A afterwards. Excuse me. And I think it's also great to bring the role of peer review into the process. Again, there's a lot of tension around where peer review helps and where peer review actually gets in the way and takes decisions. So I'd like to invite our third speaker, Leo Pruger, to come and give his introduction and looking at things from a Netherlands perspective. Do you have slides?
Yes.
Excellent. You need to install your slides. You're going to really stress my technological abilities. First of all, where do I plug them in? And it's a French keyboard. No, it's not a French keyboard, it's an English keyboard. Now that helps a lot. There'll be a short pause. And your device is ready to use, it tells me. Yes, very good. What I want is my computer. It'll be here somewhere. It'll be there somewhere.
Yep, that's the one. Let's see, this one.
Protein science education?
Yep. Oh, it's working. Okay, I have no introductory slide.
Very good. And if I put you on there,
I should...
and I push that button. Did I push the right button? Where did I push that one? Very good. Okay. I think I've passed basic ICT. Leo.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for asking me here and having this discussion with you. I was asked to stick with max 5 slides, so I have 6. But no introductory slide. This is the first one. My name is Leo Plugger. I'm from ΓÇóFoundation, which is the IT innovation organization for the whole of Netherlands, for all the universities in the Netherlands, also the universities of professional education, research institutes, hospitals, academic hospitals. So it's quite a large population that we represent. Well, I would like to get back to the question proposed, how can we enhance computer science education? Why is it important for us? Well, this is the situation in the Netherlands. We have quite a few job openings. This was until 2008, and I just heard over the radio yesterday that the number of IT jobs is leveling out again, but it was sharply rising in the first few months of this year. While at the other end, we do not have that many IT graduates in the Netherlands. So there's a problem. On the other hand, if you look at the number of students in computer science in the Netherlands, it's rising quite rapidly, particularly in what we call universities of professional education. They have tripled over the last 20 years. In contrast to the universities, the research universities, who have been leveling out almost to the level of 1990-91. So no rise in the number of students in research universities, which is of course worrisome. Now many times I hear people say that there's an influence from the businesses to when there's something booming, like the dot-com bubble, that students drop out of school and start working in industry. But that is not what we see here. If you take a look at 1996 up till 2000, about that, there's a rise at the universities of professional education. So it looks as if no one is dropping out to go and work for IT corporations. But there's something else. If you look at the absolute numbers or the relative figures for the numbers of graduates. So not the students at the universities, but actually those who receive a diploma. Then we see a very interesting result, and that is the research universities have a much higher, better result than the universities of professional education. And that there was a dip around 1996 up till 2000. And if you put in the dot-com bubble, then you can imagine why there were less graduates in those years, and it was rising again after the crisis in 2001. People tended to stay at the university. I don't know if there's a relation with the financial crisis, though. So if there would be one plea here, then from universities it would be, please don't take our students away until they have their diploma. Next, how are we doing in the Netherlands and in Europe? Well, we're not doing bad. 6 European countries are among the top 10, and 12 are among the top 20 in the Global Competitive Report in 2010-2011. So that's good. And the Netherlands was overall at the 8th place. High technological readiness, 3rd. And then we're dropping a bit. The most worrisome is the inflexible labor market, which is still, well, this is something that is more than decades old. But the fact is that we're not doing very bad. Actually, we're doing quite well. The problem is, of course, that this is not, historical successes are not a guarantee for future successes. So we should make sure that we prepare for the future. And that was what our government was doing. They had a special program for almost 20 years, at least 10 years, which was focus and mass. What the government tried to do was to focus all their extra funding into a particular number of areas for research. And the idea was that the Netherlands should get more focus in their research and more mass. I have a bad message for the government. They already know the problem, but that is that it didn't work. This is the result. From 1997 until 2009, this is the situation for specialization, focus in research. Now, they started funding somewhere around 92 extra funding, and it didn't work. the specialization dropped. So we were less specialized, less focused, actually. And the areas that received the extra funding were chemicals, materials, food and flowers, genomics, ICT, high-tech systems, and water. And the only one, well, maybe high-tech systems too, but one that really was successful was ICT. There, the number of publications grew, and in high-tech system also. But as you can see, in chemicals, it had a dramatic drop. And this is including the increase in size of the number of publications. Now, in the Netherlands, is very good at being on the highest level on cited applications. We're doing very well. I think it was on the previous slide. Ooh. Sorry. The impact score of scientific publication were 4th. So that is very well. So we have a lot of good impact publications, but as a proportion from the total output in the Netherlands, for example, chemicals dropped. Most of them were only stable. So the increased funding didn't have the effect that there were much more applications, more publications. It more or less stabilized, which is of course not what we wanted. So, to summarize that last bit, the funding directed towards focus and mass fails. There's too much a complex situation between the research domains and innovation domains. And I've listed here some of the groups. And actually the top one, government strategy, should have an extra one, the EU strategy also, with funding. And they interfere with each other. The EU strategy is not really well aligned with the national strategy, or vice versa. And the Science Foundation, the National Science Foundation in the Netherlands, has its own strategy, more or less. They try to synchronize their strategies, but they have different goals, and a different audience. And then there's, of course, the researchers' strategy. We have our own goals too. If we can't find a subsidy for a certain topic that we want to investigate, we go and find someone. Or if there is a subsidy, a grant for something, then we try to turn over our ideas so that they fit the problem being posed by the government, for example. And that is exactly what is happening. Now, what we should do is not quite sure. Some say we need more government control. I don't know. We have seen it now for the last 20 years. It didn't lead to very much more better research. I'm not very fond of very much government control. So that is one of the things that I would like to see, that it is actually reduced, the government control. I think it is, just as in normal market, research is a kind of market. If it is successful, then you will also gain more attention and get more funding. But that is something I think is interesting to discuss with you. Thank you.
I think it's a very interesting dynamic between the last two talks and an obvious question we can discuss is how do people from a national funding focus see the role of the EU, and how does the EU see its relationship with the national team. So I would like Herbert to come and give us his presentation. Thank you. If I take the microphone from you. This is a complex multi-step process. So Michel is the president of INRIA. He also has a talk, so I have to demonstrate my IT ability yet again. So Leo, that must be yours. It's already here, is it? But he has been changing it as the president. This is the advantage of going later in the sequence. So I'll push the button.
Online evolution.
Very good. This time I can't even pass the test. I plugged it in. There we go. touchpad doesn't like me very much. It must be Kingston E, I would
Right,
hope.
yeah, exactly. Right, this one. Good.
Copy and replace, how about
Right,
that?
very good. Right.
So now I do this. Oops. We should use the clicker, it's a better device for. Push button 2. Button 2, isn't it?
Speak up before jump off.
Ah.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So like the previous speaker, I have 6 slides, but the first one is just the title. So my name is Michel Cosnard, I'm Chairman and CEO of INRIA. INRIA is a research performing organization, not research funding. So it gathers more than 4,000 people in France. Among them, more than 3,000 scientists. We have 1,000 permanent researchers and more than 1,000 doctoral students. Half of them are foreigners, and the number is slightly increasing, but it's, I just go on what you said, it's more and more difficult to find European researchers. So the number of French students that wants to prepare a PhD is decreasing. Okay, so my talk will be on education, research, and innovation are key for Europe. So let's begin with education. So education in IT or IT for education. So education in IT. I think we have to change the paradigm, the education paradigm. And IT is evolving so rapidly that we have to change from knowledge to skills and innovation. So what we want to build is self-educating persons and persons that will educate all along their life. And not only as in the ancient time, persons that got first education and then used during their professional life. And we also have to build innovators and entrepreneurs, which is much more difficult than just giving knowledge to people. Second, IT for education. I think this is very, very important, and currently it's not well accepted. It's very difficult to include IT for education in other curricula from the very beginning school, garden school, up to universities. So we have to promote the education. We have to include IT basics in all curricula. Basic facts, I mean, because one of the key for the development, speaking in GDP, is the use of IT in all sectors, which is less developed in Europe than in other continents, especially in US and Asia. Second, concerning research, we have to combine focus and agility. So let me first begin with the right part of the slide, which reads from bottom to top. So we have to start from ideas. And this is, I mean, the right part of the slides advocate for researcher-oriented support. So somehow this is the way the European Research Council is working. So the right part of the slide would be the ERC description. So start from ideas, breakthrough ideas, support creative individuals, and give incentive to these people. But not only for developing their ideas, but for transforming these ideas into innovation. So do these people try to give innovation coaching, and it's why it is currently done by ERC, try to transform these ideas or invention into innovation. So from some of these research projects, select new project for innovation. On the other hand, we have to go to focus and to go goal-oriented. I put goal-oriented, but I should have also written market-oriented. So the second is more a programmatic research where we define high expecting goal and with some kind of business style management, with clear responsibilities and with involvement of small actors. This is where the question of network is important, and the fact that big companies are very, very weak innovators is key here, and innovation is often outside the company. So networking here is key. Flagship program in Europe. We have to try to define grand challenges. So I've taken the example of Fed flagship, but of course it could be developed, and Mario already addressed this point. So define grand challenges for the advancement of knowledge and technologies. And some examples, but I mean, the list can be changed when you want, but one of them could be understanding the brain. And understanding the brain is not only the goal for neurobiologists or neurologists. I mean, the IT component in this is key. If we don't work, if the best IT people don't work this, we won't be the leader in understanding the brain. Modeling and simulation for forecasting the future. I mean, what we have seen is that the current technology for predicting catastrophes or very low probability events is just at its beginning. So it's really a big challenge, and with the fact that we are, I mean, with the evolution of the climate and the change of the population in worldwide, the probability of big catastrophes is increasing. So the IT sector is key here. And of course, the future computing and telecommunication industry or technologies is a third grand challenge. But I mean, this list is just mine. You can change. But we have to address this type of challenge. But we also have to address innovation flagships. Here, I did not put a list because I'm less confident in my. But it should be market-oriented, and secondly, it should be society-oriented. And from this point of view, social networking is maybe a big challenge. There is a lot of innovation in this field, and there is no reason that only the US research institution address this, and also companies address this. And here it should include definitively SMEs. I mean, this is where the new big companies of the next decade will be done. So let me say a few words on a program in which we are involved, which is the EIT ICT Lab program. So 2 years ago, EIT, the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, has launched a call for proposal for selecting 3 KICs, knowledge and innovation communities, on 3 different domains, one in energy, one in climate modeling, and one in ICT. And the one in ICT that won the competition was EIT ICT Labs, and INAIA is part of it. So this is a network of 5 collocation centers for open innovation in Berlin, with a key player in Eindhoven, Helsinki, Paris, and Stockholm. And the idea here is to combine education, research, and innovation for business. And so each collocation center features at least one strong research institute, one major university, and one European-based multinational company with a networking of SMEs, what we call competitiveness clusters. Of course, it's not reduced only to these 5 countries and cities. It's a European network, so there are partners in UK, like Microsoft Research is part of the program, and Imperial College, for example, to cite only 2, or in Italy with Trento region and the Polytechnic of Milano. And what is EIT ICT Labs about? It's about the knowledge triangle. So this is the type of programs that will be done. So the idea is not to promote education per se. It's not to do research. It's not to make innovation. It is to have people working on the 3. And as you could see, the main program are on the border. And this is key, and I mean, money is going to projects that are trying to promote education for research and innovation. I will not go into many details, but I'm ready to answer questions. But it's clear that this is not the only one initiative, but it's this type of initiative that will change the way Europe is going from education to innovation. Thank you.
Please contact a seat. I think I should stand for the next bit on the video space, etc. I think the EIT is a very interesting experiment in trying to bring together all those forces. And one of the things we might discuss in general conversation is what precisely does this word innovation mean? Is it different to research? As different from manufacturing? So I'd like to invite up our final speaker for the first half, Stefan Jensen from Fraunhofer in Germany. I know in the British context, we're very envious of what the Fraunhofer Institutes achieve. We have something of a similar nature starting in the UK, seen as a layer, if you like, of investment in transfer of research from basic stage through to more application. And many people look to the Fraunhofer as a model for that. So very interested to hear a German perspective. Aha. It's cunningly gone for the other projector. Stefan, please. I think you need the microphone. Yeah, why don't we put the microphone on this man? We'll sort out your slides.
Okay, first of all, I of course have a lot. No, this is the wrong presentation. I'm not going to show this. I have a lot of slides, of course, but I more or less decided to give a talk on paper and show you only a few slides, yeah, because most of what has been said I'm not going to repeat, yeah. So let me start with some introduction. I'm from the Fraunhofer Institute, from one of the Fraunhofer Institutes in Berlin. I'm part of the EIT, as you may know. I'm also a professor at the Technical University of Berlin. And I think what I will do is go through several of my obligations, which I'm currently responsible for, and it's more, say, the voice of the researchers than the voice of the administrators of research. So, and you will see this soon. My first point is there was something about ICT drivers. I've been talking about ICT drivers for a long time, yeah, and I must say, at the end of my career, I'm getting older, I think there's one major driver which is very often forgotten, and that's the well-educated and skilled people driving our field. And I think that's the most essential thing we are talking about. It's on education, it's on getting young people fascinated by our field, yeah, and have them work on what we consider to be the future of all our societies, which heavily depend on ICT technologies. Now, this brings me to my first obligation. I have been talked into this. I'm currently also the president of the German Computer Society. You know, I'm one of those who never say no, yeah. So I said yes to this. And there are two things I would like to report, because the German Computer Society is very much involved in education at schools. And there are two things I would like to mention. One is that there is a competition going on in 4th and 5th grade at schools called a Beaver competition. Some of you might have heard of it. I think it comes from Scandinavia. Yeah? The interesting thing is that young kids, they get introduced for 3-4 days with computer science questions, topics. Yeah? They work on this, and during the last year, we had about 120,000 kids participating in this event. Yeah, I think that's great success because it's ICT related and it gives some attraction. The other thing is that we are currently also building up what we call the Young Engineers Academy. And Fraunhofer Society is very much involved in this. And this also, it brings kids to our institutes, kids doing some work in ICT, playing with robots, Lego robots or whatever, programming those things. And the most interesting thing I experienced, I think 1 month ago, because I normally, when they're in my institute, I go and talk to them, yeah, to the teachers as well as to the kids, yeah, and we had 80% girls. Unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable in Germany at least. I know that in many other countries it's different. 80% girls. And then I talked to a teacher, and she also said she had other courses, and she, of course, tried to attract them. So the teachers should be much more in our focus. Yeah? So that's all about the German Computer Society, I want to say. I'm also part of the DFG, but not of the administrative part of DFG, but I'm one of the reviewers, and I'm part of the reviewing process. And what I have to say, I think the DFG in what they do in funding, I think they are very well respected. They have very well-defined instruments, and they are funding research on an individual level as well as collaborative research in huge programs, the so-called Sonderforschungsbereiche, as for instance. Of course, not just in ICT, and one of the, say, very high-valued activities in these areas is also Berlin-located Mathion, mathematics research institute, but to be serious, most of what they do has to do with computer science. Yeah, so it's very much applied mathematics, and they are very successful in this. So DFG is funding all this, and I think that's well established. Yeah, and the reviewing process in itself is also very, very well established and very well known. The next thing is the ERC. I'm, as I can not say no, I'm currently also chairing the informatics panel in the ERC. And the ERC in itself, I'm working for them now for 3 periods, is a success story in itself. I think that in the first period, ERC was in a difficult position because the ERC got just too many proposals. And it was one of the hardest tasks to actually select between those proposals. I was part of the panel there. I think I had to review about 120 proposals within 4 days. And this is not serious. Yeah, I mean, you have to do it somehow. Yeah, so we ran a great danger in the first year that we would select the wrong people to actually get the grants. Nowadays it has been changed, and I think the ERC is one of the great success stories in the European Union. Yeah? It is only based on excellence. Yeah? It's doubling its budget in the last year. It's only based on excellence, and as a chair of the informatics panel and with the others also, we are advised to not allow any argument, any other argument in the reviewing process than excellence. Yeah, so it's only on the scientific part the evaluation takes place. It's support for individual grants, yeah, and those of you who do not know it, there are two categories, the starting grants and the advanced grants. The starting grants, the individuals get an amount of approximately 1.5 million for a period of 4 or 5 years, which is a substantial amount of money, yeah? And there's almost no control on what's done with the money. It's only the research. Yeah? So I think this is an excellent instrument. The advanced grants for people who are more advanced are giving even some more money out of this. So please, keep ERC. I think it's one of the best things we have currently for research. I'm the voice of the researchers, as I said. Okay, I just came back yesterday from a meeting of the European Science Foundation. Yeah, and I'm also part of the standing committee of the European Science Foundation and the core group also evaluating proposals for this. I must say the ESF is in bad shape. Yeah, and there's going to happen a merger between the European Science Foundation and the EuroHawks, the heads of the funding organizations in Europe, and I think that's pretty well. But on the other hand, we had for 2 days very intensive discussions on what researchers want from, say, newly formed ESF. And there were two things which came across. Yeah? The first is that they would like to see more exploratory work. Yeah? So exploratory workshops, yeah? Exploratory events where people could connect themselves in Europe or all over the world, yeah, in order to produce new ideas. Yeah, and the second one was that they wanted to sharpen this instrument of foresight reviews and foresight studies, which I also think is an important thing to have. Yeah, so give people the freedom to just collaborate on ideas which are very risky, yeah, and try to bring them across. Now, the EIT, I think Michel has already mentioned the ICT labs. We are involved in this as well. And there is another very small example, and this is what's on my slides, which I would like to mention. It's, I think, the smallest thing I'm currently involved in. Yeah, it's called the DCIT. It's the Daimler Center for Automotive IT Innovations, and I just show you some of the slides, just some of them. Yeah, because it's a collaborative project which has only two partners, the Daimler company in Germany and the Technical University. So a couple of years ago, Daimler moved its research labs out of Berlin back to Stuttgart. Yeah, and the Technical University and the rest of the group came to this idea to start a center which would be focused on research which is essential for the Daimler company, and on the other hand would be based on research, producing PhDs, producing master students, and in addition to this, try to get involved in the teaching at the university. Yeah, so it's a very small thing. Yeah, it's actually, when you look at the slide, you see the DCIT there. There's this big building, and it's not only a building for DCIT, but it's also where the ICT labs are in, and EICT is in, and whatsoever. So we have many of such activities. Now, you see on this slide that it's not just this Daimler Institute or Technical University Institute together with Daimler, but that we have the T-Labs there, the Telecom Research Labs, yeah, that we have a company, the EICT, which is also quite interesting. It's a company which has been started by Daimler, yeah, by Siemens, by Deutsche Telekom, Opera, and the Fraunhofer Society plus the Technical University of Berlin, with the main purpose to acquire and administer and manage huge research projects. very successful. They are running now a budget of about 200 million euros, managing projects of this budget, which I think is also very nice. Now, I will more or less stop here at this point and just show you a little bit of the structure, because there's, of course, a lot of IP discussion, IPR discussion involved in this. But what you should see is that this is an interesting scene which combines university activities plus industry. And that's what I want to leave you as a message. As a last sentence, let me say, or let me give you my definition of research and innovation. Yeah, I think research is something you put money in and get knowledge out. And innovation is where you put knowledge in and get the money out. The second is probably the most difficult out of this. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Stefan, if you can join colleagues on the couch.
Sorry.
I will read the microphone as well. So I'm proposing we give ourselves about 15 minutes opportunity for questions from the floor, and then we'll have a coffee break of about 20 minutes and come back for the second part. I did like your closing shot. I, in fact, have a similar but even cruder definition myself. As someone who started his career in academia, went into running small companies for a while, and now in industry research, which is a halfway house. I thought of my academic phase as when I was creating intellectual capital. My entrepreneurial phase is when I was spending that capital and turning it into revenue.
Of course. And
now I'm kind of living in both worlds, trying to get both those things in balance. And indeed, as someone who manages a research organization, I think of that in many ways as like managing an investment portfolio. Some things are long-term speculative, some things are very short-term and secure, if you like. And if you can get the right balance, then life is very happy. I want to be strangle myself. Hi. Okay, very good. So, I think we have some people with roving microphones, yes? The one who is tall enough I can see him. Maybe it's turned off. Is that better? Yes. Voila. Okay, we have some people with roving microphones, so I'm very happy to take questions from the floor. Gentleman in the middle.
Hi, I'm Bashar Nusseibeh from the Open University in the UK and Lero, Ireland. So thank you for the various talks. I really enjoyed the last talk because it actually talked about young people and how we get them into software engineering or into computing or into IT. But I was struck by the fact that a lot of the strategies that were discussed by the previous speakers were mostly about challenges, addressing issues of the brain, climate, energy, and so on. And I think sometimes in education we try and push things like how exciting computing, for example, can be. But then when we talk about the real jobs in industry, people think about being neuroscientists or being people who work in climate and energy. And I wonder if there's this insecurity that we have in computing, that it's more of a service discipline to those bigger and grander disciplines. And I wonder how we can change that perception and maybe even feel more secure in ourselves that it's okay to be doing computing for the service of other disciplines and still be recognized as doing significant and fundamental research.
Okay, so that's a great question. I know it's one that Tony Hay and I have discussed very often. Is computer scientists, core computer scientists, I think it's a badge he stuck on us, can sometimes be reluctant to join in some of these multidisciplinary things because we feel we're being exploited as a service industry. But in fact, we often have a lot to contribute. As other questions, I think this plays to interdisciplinary research, how computer science is perceived. I don't know if any of the panelists want to respond to that. Leslie, I'm going to pick on you first of all, because I think I know some of the things you might say. But
yeah, well, I'm going to surprise you. Hi, is that working? No.
Click the button.
Hi. Okay. So, actually, I think it's the wrong definition. I think computer scientists are brilliant at doing good computer science, and some of those fascinating challenges come from some of the real-world problems. The dichotomy, more often than not, comes from when I talk to computer scientists, not when I talk to people from other disciplines. I think there's something about the age of computer science that maybe leads to more insecurity than you would get from a mathematician or from a chemist or a physicist. I just think computer scientists have so much to give the world. If only they were a bit more self-assured. And now I'm going to get slaughtered by lots of self-assured computer scientists.
Now, I think I know the problem, yeah, and it's to convince people to go into computer science education whatsoever. And it is a problem, yeah, of course, and maybe we are not self-confident enough. I just written down 10 points why one should actually study computer science. I'll give you 2 of them. Yeah? The first was, would you like to work with the largest machine the humankind has ever built? The internet. And adapt to this. Yeah? Second, would you like to work with the fastest machines we've ever built? Isn't this fascinating? And now bringing this technology into other fields, I mean working on the interface to people dealing with energy or dealing with engineer, whatever, yeah? With climate, whatsoever. It's fascinating because you have to actually change your mind every time you have someone from another discipline talking to you. So you can learn all your life long.
Okay. Anyone else wish to comment? I think Michelle.
It's not because there is a danger that we should not advance. So understanding the brain is a grand challenge. So we have two possibilities. One is say, okay, it's just neurobiologists that should go there, and we don't care. And I think it's a wrong point, because IT is key in this. And the question of being respected or being used as just technicians is just a matter of the quality of the people that will do that. If the best computer scientists are working with the best neurobiologists, they will be respected. And why I'm so convinced? Because from 10 years ago, biology changed completely. Biology is no longer a question of collecting data. Collecting data is done by machines. Biology is now of analyzing data. So a biologist now is more an IT people rather than a guy who makes experiments to get data. So the change of disciplines, of the way science is done, has been very much impacted by IT. And we should be proud of this, okay? Okay, I mean, I strongly follow you when you said we must develop our own discipline. But the way our discipline is developing is on the border, is by interacting with other sciences, by addressing societal challenges. And one of them may be in our field. I mean, it's what I written in my slide. I mean, the way, the evolution of the computing paradigm. But if we look from our very inside perspective, the evolution is toward multidisciplinarity. So we will not avoid this.
Can I just say that I guess that this question is similar to the one that you can put when you think about the programs on ICT. You know, 20 years ago you would design an ICT program, you live isolated, but it's a pure design exercise. You see what you want to invest in. But now we confront ourselves in the very same way, and I think we should transform this sort of a shy or weakness into a strength. We confront ourselves with policies that come from climate or from societal challenges. I mean, it's a more complex environment, but it's certainly the one that will give us the biggest impact. And I think that this is the whole comments here.
Okay, Pastor Leo.
Yes, I want to add to that because I think it's already changing. I don't think we have an inherent weakness that we don't want to serve anyone or that we're not visible, too much visible. What we see in the Netherlands, at least, is with e-science, whether it's biology or life sciences, environmental science, chemistry, there's IT everywhere. And what we also see is that the multidisciplinary cooperation is also within the life sciences. So, for example, I'm from origin, I'm a cognitive psychologist, and we love to work with IT people, hard IT people, or mathematicians, as well as I worked with psychiatrists or neurologists. I think the idea that we are IT people is something from the 60s when you were a nerd and sitting behind a computer. I think that is changing, and what we are trying to teach our students, at least I do and my colleagues do, is to cooperate with different disciplines in projects, and that they work not just with IT people, but with other people as well.
Thank you. So it's great to have a first question that actually gets an enthusiastic response from all the panel. If I add a couple of words on my own, I think a related but also quite important issue is how we introduce computing to school children, the ones that are under 18 who might become computer science students in due course. And I think across many European countries, certainly in the UK, I know certainly in the US, there's a real concern. They're taught ICT, how to do word processing and spreadsheets, and you can blame a certain company for that. They're not taught about programming, using computers to build models and simulations. They have no idea of these other things that computer scientists get up to. And that's something we've been trying to address in the UK with the British Computer Society. We've a program called Computing at Schools. And we're finding tremendous enthusiasm from school teachers who would love to teach this stuff if only the computer science community would tell them what we do and why it's more than just programming, and certainly a lot more than just programming and spreadsheets and word processing. So I think we have to address the whole education cycle. I'd like to take another question.
Vladimir Safonov, Professor Vladimir Safonov, St. Petersburg University, Russia. So I'm a very experienced, not only university teacher, but I have a lot of experience, about 19 years of collaborating to industrial companies and to some funding agencies. And so I would like to spend a few minutes to express my viewpoint on this subject and how it is doing in Russia. Yeah. So, to be brief, so to one of the first speakers, you told a lot about what is being done for European members. Unfortunately, by now, Russia is a very big and full of talented people, but a big country which is not a European member. So, what shall we do? So we cannot participate in these programs. I am eager to do that, but it is not possible. So I strongly advise it. So I kindly advise to all respectful funding agencies to think about that. So there are a lot of countries, including Russia, who deserve, I believe, who deserve funding. So
can I take that as the question for the panel to respond to, as time is very short? And the question really is international collaboration outside of your immediate area of funding and control, how that might work better. I don't know, who would like to? Mario.
Just to make it clear, it is possible for Russian partners to participate in EU-funded projects. We have a lot of collaboration with Russian partners. We stepped up the collaboration with Russia recently. You know that we can do, say, bottom-up collaborations with any researcher participating in a project because he has good relations with one university or research center, whatever, then he's a member of a consortium. But we actually did do what we call a coordinated call, out of which Russia has put some money, we have put some money, and it was actually in the domain of computing. So, this is a concrete example where the things are happening currently. And I know that there are difficulties. I don't want to hide it in signing a science and technology agreement with Russia, but maybe the time and the environment will favor that soon, hopefully.
Michelle, do you want to say some words? I know IMRE has a number of international collaborations, and collaborating with Microsoft with a lab in the UK for a Frenchman must be an interesting challenge.
Yes, we have many collaboration with European and non-European companies or universities, including China. It's still difficult to work with Russia, especially because of some kind of very, very evolutive world. So we never know if the people with whom we work will still be there the year after, if the institution will still be financed, etc. I think we, in order to develop research, and what we are doing is long-term research, we should be in a very stable environment. And I think that the Russian system of research has to evolve in its institution to promote excellence, as in other countries, and try to, if I could say, help himself. I mean, the best way to progress is to believe in its strength, and then to work with the other, not to wait for other people to make the difference. I mean, this, what I said to Russia is true also for Europe, of course. So when we work with another company or another institution, it's not just for having more money or more funds. It's because we will work with excellent people, and excellence plus excellence is much better.
Okay. If anyone else wants to make a comment?
Maybe just a recommendation. I mean, the ERC I mentioned before is open for international applications, so Russians would be eligible for doing this. The only restriction is that the money then, if granted, has to be spent in Europe or one of the associated countries.
Very good. So I think there are some open doors. We would encourage you to come through them. I know from a Microsoft research perspective, we've been trying to understand and learn more about Russia in recent years through things like summer schools, inviting Russian students as interns into our laboratories and visiting faculty. And I think those personal relationships are the way one builds a research community. And I certainly would welcome more collaboration. I think the stability point is a very important one. But I'm reminded of a discussion with the head of the computer laboratory in Cambridge when I was a junior academic, and we had the first application from a Red Chinese research student, and it came with references from professors at universities we'd never heard of, some of them written in Chinese, which we weren't terribly good at reading. And Roger and I looked at this, and he said, well, you know, if we don't take this one, we're never going to take a Red Chinese. We've got to start sampling the system so we learn and understand. We took that first one. Actually, he was extremely successful. He's now a senior computer science academic in his own right, and that started a whole lot of collaboration with a country that was a much bigger mystery to us in Cambridge in the 1970s than Russia is in the 21st century to Europeans. So I think we should open our doors and do a certain amount of trial. But I think, yes, Russia also has to find ways to work with us and establish its systems. Michelle, you want to respond?
Let me say that at Hinoya, where we have more than 1,000 PhD students, 250 are from Asia. I don't know the number from Russia, but it must be less than 10. 10 years ago, it was 0 from China and less than 10 from Russia. So it's clear that it's not only a matter of being close or far, of education, it's a matter of political and scientific will.
Absolutely. So I'm going to break us now for coffee and ask you to be back fairly promptly at 11:15, which gives you just over 15 minutes. And I'd like to thank the panel for the first half. Thank you for very good contributions.